A major theme of Biden's stream of lies last night was that we are the worst in the world. America's the worst in the world when it comes to COVID response. That's just not true. But before we go to that, I also want to note that for some leftists, notably one commentator at CNN, the problem was that the protesters on the streets, who should be at this point, at least in some way, the ones that are violent, the ones that are destroying stuff, should be condemned. The protesters on the streets didn't see enough of what they needed. Play clip 1.
He has to have plans for criminal justice reform. He has to have plans for police reform. He can't be afraid of it because there might be an endorsement from a police union. It was such a good, powerful moment, but it was lacking on the substance that these young folks who have been in the streets all summer so desperately need to see from Joe Biden. And it shouldn't just fall on Kamala. That's the truth. If he says he supports justice and policing, I wanted to hear him say tonight, one of the first things I will do in my first 30 days after being sworn in is address police reform by signing justice and policing, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a heavy lift, but I just wanted a little more heft there.
Justice in policing. This tells you a lot about where the Democrat Party is right now at a time when people are increasingly worried in major cities about just being out on the street, particularly at night, and you've seen major spikes in violence, major spikes in shootings. The answer is more bail reform, more hamstringing the police, more limiting the ability of law enforcement to actually punish people who do. But this is the thing. Democrats, every time their policies fail, because of their mentality, because of the blinders they have and the absolutism that is at the heart of their ideology, right? The need to control, the need to be in control of other people. Whenever what they do fails, the answer has to be more of that thing, right? What's the problem with schools? We need more government spending. We've already been spending so much more money on schools in recent years than we did before. More spending has to be more, right? We're seeing defund the police and undermining cops having negative consequences. What's the answer to that? More defunding of police, more undermining our law enforcement apparatus, as if that's a good idea. You know, just remember this. The mayor of Chicago has shown everybody she's fine with protesters out on the street. She's fine with all the stuff that you're seeing for the BLM movement. Doesn't really approve of, at least publicly, doesn't approve of the looting. But she doesn't want protesters on her block. That's noisy and annoying. So they're banned. They're not allowed to protest at her taxpayer-funded house. That's not allowed. That's too much. That's a safety issue. This is the classic lib game they play. You can't have firearms to defend yourself, but the fancy libs, they may not have firearms themselves because guns are icky, but they want armed security that's trained to protect them all the time. They get to feel safe all the time. You don't. Because your safety, that's a price that has to be paid so that we have equity in the criminal justice system. That's what they'll tell you. That's what the claim will be. And speaking of somebody that really doesn't want you to have guns, but always has private security on hand for himself, Mike Bloomberg. He spoke last night. Here's what little mini Mike Bloomberg had to say. He was very... gosh, everyone here is so poor. Play 8.
I'm not asking you to vote against Donald Trump because he's a bad guy. I'm urging you to vote against him because he's done a bad job. Today, unemployment is at historic highs, and small businesses are struggling just to survive. It didn't have to be this way. Before I ran for mayor, I spent 20 years running a business I started from scratch. So I want to ask small business owners and their employees one question, and it's a question for everyone. Would you rehire or work for someone who ran your business into the ground and who always does what's best for him or her, even when it hurts the company, and whose reckless decisions put you in danger, and who spends more time tweeting than working? If the answer is no, why the hell would we ever rehire Donald Trump for another 4 years?
Let me just say this about Bloomberg. Mayor Bloomberg. The biggest problem Bloomberg has when it comes to Trump is jealousy. Look, Bloomberg wanted to be president. Bloomberg thinks, well, and Bloomberg is self-made, and financially Trump is not. The fact, okay, we do deal in facts here. And he looks at Trump and he thinks, why is this guy, how has he become? I started Bloomberg, the corporation, and I'm worth, I don't know what it is now, $50 billion, $60 billion. And why is Donald Trump a bigger deal than I am? That's really the thinking here. So it's very personal. With a lot of Trump's critics, you have to separate out immediately those who are just honestly jealous of the guy. There's a lot of jealousy when it comes to Donald Trump. And some of you might be saying, Buck, we're going to keep it real. Yeah, Trump is a thin-skinned guy. That is a valid criticism of him. We deal in reality here. But there are also a lot of people who are just obsessed with how much they can't deal with Trump being more prominent than them, more powerful. I mean, Bloomberg falls in that category. Because Bloomberg knows enough about business and knows enough about how to make a profit that putting Biden in charge is just stupid. And Biden doesn't know anything. Biden doesn't have ideas. But here's what you do get with Biden. Somebody who will do what the Democrat apparatus tells him to do. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's the whole game. That's everything that is needed. And I think that's the plan that they have. That, and also to tell people that this is about stopping fascism. AOC. Anytime a Democrat wants to tell you that, Republicans and Donald Trump are so dumb, just remember that AOC, to any person paying attention, is clearly not very bright. I don't mean that in a mean way. It is a mean thing to say, but she's a prominent public figure who is pushing for ideas that will harm a lot of us, will make our lives crappier. AOC is not very bright. She is very powerful. She's a big a big name, I should say, in the Congress, and has a huge social media following. But, it's really the kind of rise of the young, stupid leftist through politics. And they have a lot of support. A lot of people on social media who've never read a book who are like, yeah, AOC is amazing. She's still out there telling everybody that this is about, you can't make this up, stopping fascism. That's what this election's really all about. Play 6.
I think it's really important for us to kind of talk about the deeper issues about this election, because let's keep it real, right? Like, we need to win in November. November is about, in my opinion, stopping fascism in the United States, and that is what Donald Trump represents.
Donald Trump represents fascism, she says, and kind of giggles about it. Now, that's not new. We've heard this for 4 years. In what way does Donald Trump represent fascism? I think fascism is the previous political party that had control of the White House using the national security apparatus to spy on and try to destroy the incoming administration because they were such sore losers, such a bunch of whiny little crybabies. That's Democrat. Hillary did win. Hillary's a horrible person. Can we stop this? No one thinks Hillary's a good person. Hillary is ruthless and craven and not impressive. Failed the bar exam the first try. I went to Yale Law School. Buck is not impressed. Not impressive. Stood by her husband. Yes, because she's rapacious and greedy and has a lust for power and had a famous last name because her husband kind of, stumbled into the presidency and the media propped him up. They're all still bitter about the great years of Reaganism. God, I miss the 80s. And yes, I do remember them. A little bit. Oof. Trump is a fascist. How? You ask your friends this question, or I don't know if you're friends with anybody who thinks that, but you ask people that bring this up. Explain why he's a fascist. I have to walk around now in New York City with people looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm not wearing a porous cloth over my mouth outdoors. Does anybody really think that this is, one, a risk to me, and two, that this makes a difference? This is crazy. I mean, this is basic biochemistry, really, when you think about it. The air is still, you're breathing. You can put your hand above and below the mask. The air is still coming out. All the viruses are getting stuck in the mask. That's what. I mean, look, I know people are scared. People, when you're frightened, you just want someone to tell you it's all going to be okay. The government's not going to make it all okay. You know, this is really the separation psychologically between adults and the little children of the left and some Republicans and some conservatives, or at least they call themselves conservatives in this country. The government's not going to keep you safe. Not from a virus. You can say, oh, Buck, but what about law enforcement? You talk about that all the time. Yeah, they do the best they can, but I also tell you to take your own precautions. Right? Yeah, I want cops on the streets. I also want anybody who can and wants to be able to conceal carry. I also wish that I had, I visited a friend of mine down in North Carolina, last weekend, which is why I'm in now a week into my quarantine. And I just asked him in passing. He says, we were talking about going shooting. He was a Marine. He's been a friend of mine for over 30 years. And he's still in the reserves. And I said, yeah, so what's the gun? What are the gun laws here like in North Carolina? I'm assuming they're pretty friendly. He goes, yeah. I said, what do you got? He just starts rattling off, he's got I think he has a SIG, he's got an AR, he's got a shot, he's like, and he was almost like, yeah, I need to go and get a few more. Like, I don't really have everything I need. I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, you got a semi-automatic rifle, you got a couple other long guns, you got a sidearm, you're in business, my friend. And here in New York, oh yeah, I can get a 20 gauge double barrel if I beg and plead after 6 months and put a lockbox on not just the ammunition, but a trigger guard. It's crazy. But I do believe in taking control of your own destiny, your own life as much as possible. And Democrats don't. They offer you the false promise of safety, the false promise of prosperity through the hands of government. See, that's the big difference. Trump isn't saying that he's going to make everything happen for everyone. He's just saying we're going to get government out of the way and try to foster conditions that allow people to succeed. The government is not in a position to make a success out of you, although they do pay a lot of bureaucrats to do very little. But fascism? Fascism. This is something that they say that is now a charge that only stupid people can make against the president. There are real criticisms of Trump that can be defended against, we can disagree with, but there are real criticisms, to be sure. Saying that Trump is a fascist is for morons. Okay, he was offered, if he were a fascist, on a silver platter, the ability to suspend rights on a whim, to keep people in their homes, to shut down businesses, to give some freedoms to some people. John Lewis's 8th funeral. Yeah, sit on each other's laps, snuggle, doesn't matter. We'll waive the D.C. quarantine for all you Democrats when you go back. John Lewis needs like 4 or 5 funerals. You can't have a funeral for your family. John Lewis, he deserves like a million of them. Obviously the protesters out on the streets. That's fascism, by the way. That's authoritarianism. When you have the very strict application of capricious laws, right? So I can make you do whatever I want and punish you as severely as I want, and I'm not going to hold other people to the same standard. That's when you're really in a scary authoritarian state. That's what truly undermines you. Because if you look at the history of whether it's fascist or Marxist regimes, communist regimes, there's always a different set of rules for the people enforcing the rules because they couldn't live under the rules that they make for you. Go and read the Gulag Archipelago, and you see that the mentality of the bureaucrats who are sending people away, as Solzhenitsyn writes about it, sending people away for 10 years to a labor camp where they'll likely die, and even if they don't, when they come back, there'll be a shadow of them of their former selves. And their attitude was to be annoyed if the people that they were trying to send away for 10 years who didn't do anything wrong weren't more helpful in the process of getting themselves sent away for 10 years to the Gulag. That's what real authoritarianism feels like. And who is closer to that? Do you think the Democrats or the Republicans? Who takes it upon themselves to have endless power to enforce stupid rules in a capricious fashion? It's Democrats, not Republicans. Trump has been saying, let's go back to work, but Democrats seized on the fear narrative. They seized on the fear narrative, and it is very powerful. It's a very powerful tool in their arsenal to get people to stop thinking rationally and just put whoever will make the biggest promises about keeping them safe and warm at night in power. But if you call Trump a fascist, you're truly a dumbass.
As president, the first step I will take will be to get control of the virus that has ruined so many lives. Because I understand something this president hasn't from the beginning. We will never get our economy back on track. We will never get our kids safely back in schools. We'll never have our lives back until we deal with this virus. The tragedy of where we are today is it didn't have to be this bad. Just look around. It's not this bad in Canada or Europe or Japan or almost anywhere else in the world. And the president keeps telling us the virus is going to disappear. He keeps waiting for a miracle. Well, I have news for him. No miracle is coming.
So the virus is going to just go away at some point. That is true. That's what epidemiology tells us. At some point, that is true. So we can stop saying that that's not true, because it is true. The virus will go. We don't know when. Could be 6 months, could be 6 years, who knows? But the virus will. And if it morphs and it becomes like the seasonal flu, well, then we'll develop better and better immunity over time to it. So it might still be dangerous, but it'll become less dangerous over time. But let's just focus in on the bigger lie here, that the rest of the world has done so much better than we have. That's not true. Italy hasn't done better than we have. Great Britain hasn't done better than we have. France hasn't done better than we have. Brazil hasn't done better than we have. I mean, you look on a per capita basis. What matters is fatalities from this. That is the single most important metric that you can see when you're talking about how you respond to a virus. How many of your people did you lose? And I'm just going to say this. Another part of this that I think people don't want to talk about, but is very true. Why does Japan have so few fatalities from this? You start to look at other countries. There is ample science and data to back this up right now. Unfortunately, not only is age a very big component of this, but body mass index, BMI, plays a major role for those who are already susceptible age-wise to having the most severe forms of the disease. This is just what we see. So America has a much higher per capita BMI than many of the other countries that we're talking about. So we may have a more susceptible population. You see, disease doesn't care about equity. Disease does what it does. And we're not the same country as other countries. We don't have the same population. We don't have the same health habits. But what is it that President Trump was supposed to do that he didn't do? And while I'm telling you about BMI, I got to say, they really plan on keeping gyms locked down in cities forever, because that is, I'm being serious, making people more susceptible to the disease. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Brad Thor comes his latest, Near Dark. This is all about Scott Harvath, a continuation of the series where Scott Harvath knows that he must unravel the enemy's deadly plot before darkness prevails. His only hope for survival is to outwit, outrun, and outlast his enemies long enough to get to the truth. But for Scott Harvath to accomplish his most dangerous mission ever, one that has already claimed the lives of people closest to him, including his new wife, he's going to need a lot of help. Who can he trust? He finds an unlikely ally in a Norwegian intelligence operative who's just as smart, deadly, and determined as he is. Near Dark is the latest in the Scott Harvath series. This is an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. This is the thriller novel you want to be reading on the beach, out back on the porch, up on a plane, you name it. Check out Near Dark, the latest by Brad Thor, wherever you get books, including Amazon.com. Of all the areas of rewriting of the Obama-Biden administration's history, I think the one that is the most galling, other than many, that's a tough call to make, but one of the ones that's most annoying is the pretense that they were not a foreign policy disaster. It's a very simple exercise that you can all do. When you think about the Obama-Biden years, think of a foreign policy challenge that arose during that time. and then think about whether it was better or worse after the Obama-Biden team dealt with it. Better or worse? That's the game you play. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria. Think of a country. Think of a place. Better or worse? From a U.S. interest perspective, better or worse? It's very easy, isn't it? A rolling series of disasters. Why is that surprising, considering that you have Susan Rice and Samantha Power as the intellectual engine room of Obama's foreign policy? That's absurd. These are not impressive people. They're not people that anyone should listen to. But we did. They had a lot of power. Remember Hillary? We saw, he died. Hee, Hillary, hee. Ah, he died. What happened? They wanted her to be president, folks. That was going to be a great idea. One thing that I always notice that separates the way that Democrats feel about these politicians and everything from the way the Republicans do. One big difference that I see is that Democrats aren't willing to recognize the flaws and failings. I expect politicians, whether it's Trump or anyone else, to have shortcomings. That's why I'll tell you when I think there's a valid criticism of them. And I know that there are people that probably go, I can listen to some other radio host who used to call Trump an idiot on his show and now pretends that he's Mr. Super Trump, right? I could do that, but I want to tell you the truth always. And there are some areas that, of course, the president's imperfect, right? That shouldn't grate on anyone's sensibilities. That shouldn't be. But I think he's overall been an incredibly effective both messenger and advocate for conservative policies. And he has saved us from 4 years of Hillary, which I am thankful for that. And I think, President Trump at this point, I'd give him probably an A-. It was good. It wasn't perfect. It was really solid, though. I mean, if you look in retrospect, I think President Bush, at least through the second term, was more like a C+. So I think Trump has done a very sound job. But Democrats are unwilling to speak honestly about the shortcomings of the politicians they like. Look, if they stylistically, and she's very telegenic, and there's all this appeal for AOC, but they should be like, look, it's obviously somebody who's kind of an ignoramus. Obviously not much of a student, not particularly bright, but really found her niche and running with it, and has a lot of power in the Democrat Party now, trying to make the country socialist. But they won't admit that to you. That they won't say that. You notice that Republicans also we will really go after some of our own. I mean, I think Marco Rubio increasingly has shown himself to be very disappointing as a leader. Very disappointing. To the point where maybe this guy needs to get primaried. Just going to put that out there. And there are others, too, where, we on our own side will say this person, they've really failed the team. I just don't think you hear that from Democrats. And you certainly won't hear them be honest about when a Republican speaks about Trump, they'll say, yeah, I mean, sometimes a little rough around the edges. And, I get it. He's a little bit of he can do a little bit of BSing sometimes or whatever. But, I love the policies. I think he's a fighter. And I'm with it. When Democrats speak about politicians, they'll be like, Obama is literally God. No, like literally. Like he is God. And you're like, well, some of the stuff he didn't really work out so well. And, if you hear him speaking off the cuff, not off the prompter, it's pretty whatever. How could you say that about somebody who is literally like God? Oh, my God. So I think this is a political, cultural difference between the two sides. I don't expect politicians to be great, Ted Cruz even. I think Ted Cruz, he's obviously a very smart guy. I think Ted Cruz and I are aligned politically 95, maybe 99% of the time. But he grew a beard and he throws some more jokes out there now, and he's working on a part of him that was a little bit deficient before, where he seemed a little bit like a pompous jerk sometimes, even to his own side, a little arrogant, right? And that's why he even said, I'm not somebody you necessarily the first person you want to have a beer with. I think Ted realized, well, actually, he could be the guy that people want to have a beer with, and he's kind of, he's loosened things up a little bit, grew a beard, felt like put a little hair on his face, a little more hair on his chest, and now he's kind of like, yeah, bring it, So obviously, we're all constantly, those of us who approach ourselves with honesty, we're all works in progress. We're all doing things. But Democrats, it's a cult. And that's what I'm really trying to get to. It's always about the elevation of these people to an exalted status that they don't really deserve. And now we're seeing that with Joe Biden. And I'm just like, you guys have got to be kidding. You agreed until 5 minutes ago that he was like not impressive at all. And now it's the best speech of his life. Oh my God, the speech was amazing. He's fantastic. Oh, you know what we really need? The woman from Seinfeld to tell us what's going on. Play 3.
Joe Biden shares John Lewis's belief that every vote matters. Personally, I plan to follow the example of 6 current cabinet members, Vice President Pence and President Trump himself, and vote by mail. To find out everything you need to know about mail-in ballots, your polling place, or even just, am I registered? Text VOTE to 30330. 30330. That would be the president's golf score if he didn't cheat. Okay, look, I'll admit that was a little nasty, but we all know he's a cheater. And I'm proud to be a nasty, nasty woman.
Mission accomplished. She got that one done. That's for sure. Producer Mark, is Seinfeld off the list, or is it still such a classic that you will watch it after this?
Yeah, Seinfeld's never coming off my list.
Never
sorry.
coming off the list? Okay. Fair enough. It is pretty funny. I will give that. I've actually heard Veep is pretty funny too, but
I have as well. Never got around to watching it.
Never gotten around to it yet. But let's talk about vote by mail, shall we? Because the whole Trump is trying to steal the election with his Postmaster General conspiracy has been lost in the mail in the last day, my friends.
As we head into the election season, I want to assure this committee and the American public that the Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's election mail securely and on time. This sacred duty is my number one priority between now and Election Day.
Does anyone really doubt this man at this point? If you do, it's because you've been listening to the Democrat propaganda around all this. But the USPS Postmaster General DeJoy testified before the Senate. And this, I'm sure, will not do anything to quiet the most wild-eyed conspiracy theorists about this, who really believe that this was some nefarious plot to steal the election. Keep in mind that if you get rid of the post office boxes and you do all these things they claim is at the heart of the conspiracy, you'd be hurting everybody who votes, right? So, yes, I know there's a belief that universal mail-in ballots would benefit Democrats, but we don't even really know. We don't really know. But there is a more central belief for Democrats that if more people only voted, they would win. Like they never actually lose. It's never that their ideas are bad and don't make sense and that they're a bunch of crybabies. That's never what the actual end result is. It's always something else. So DeJoy testifies before the Senate, and here's what he has to say about the theories out there that this is all meant to be some plot to steal the election. Play 20.
Prior to implementing the changes, did you discuss these changes or their impact on the election with any Trump campaign officials?
No, sir. These changes in our total analysis here and going forward, and remember, I'm one new person in the organization with the whole structure around me, an operating structure, an executive team around me that are involved in these decisions. Okay, and moving forward, trying to have any negative impact on the election is an outrageous claim.
You know, since the Postmaster DeJoy took over, the United States Postal Service has spent $700 million on overtime, a rate that has not changed. Where are these nefarious changes happening? Where are these nefarious changes? We don't see them. They don't happen. This is all hysteria, friends. DeJoy has told the Senate that the USPS has the money, the manpower, the resources necessary so that it can provide all of the support during the election that it has to. In fact, USPS, I see here from Josh Hawley, very smart fellow, rising star in the GOP, has more cash on hand now than it has ever in its history. It's got almost $15 billion cash on hand. So let's be very honest about what's happening here. This is a narrative about election theft that is false, but is meant to undermine, in advance of the election, the opponent's possible victory. That's all this really is. And that's why you have, that's why you have 20 states, Democrat blue states, suing the USPS over this already. Postal Service has faced $78 billion that it has lost since 2007. And DeJoy's changes to it are meant to preserve the post office. But see, this is whether it's about General Motors or anything else, Democrats don't understand. A failing business model has to be fixed. And the way to fix a failing business model is not to continue to spend more than you make. There would have to be changes here. There would have to be things that get cut, things that are shifted around. And the allegation that there is sabotage from the post office is simply not supported by the facts. Louis DeJoy also told the Senate committee that he was extremely highly confident that even mail-in ballots sent close to Election Day would be delivered on time. All right, so he is not worried about that. So states that have already made provisions, if your state allows you to do a mail-in ballot, I know there are some states that do that, nothing is going to change. Your ballots will get through and everything's fine. But it doesn't really matter, right? We know this. It doesn't matter that he's addressing these concerns. It doesn't matter if, in fact, every single ballot is delivered on time, as presented, as asked, because the problem ultimately is the possibility of Donald Trump winning. That's the real problem. The real problem is that the Democrats recognize that they're trying to pull off what would seem to a normal person to be impossible, which is convincing the American people that Joe Biden is a fantastic candidate for president of the United States. And he's up against this, a president who has done a good job for 4 years, is in the midst of a very big challenge. Play clip 20.
We will create 10 million jobs in the next year. We will hire more police. We will ban sanctuary cities. We will appoint prosecutors, judges, and justices who believe in the rule of law, not the rule of that horrible mob that you get to watch on television. We will provide school choice in every home. We're gonna let you have school choice. That's a very important thing. The Democrats don't want anything to do with school choice. We will lower the price of prescription drugs, as I said. We will build and expand our energy infrastructure to a level that is even greater than what we have right now. And when I said before we're number one by a lot. Nobody thought we'd ever be number one. And we are energy independent, which is very nice. And as we've been doing, we will end our reliance on China and other countries for drugs and other things.
Those all sound like good things to me. When I listen to the Democrats talk, it's a lot of, we're going to do good things. And I say, but how? Well, how are you going to achieve that? Trump is talking about things that he's already been doing with a booming economy. He's already been doing with bringing down prescription drug prices. But we are in the world of funhouse mirrors, friends. That what we're seeing from the Democrats is not reality. I just want to say, be prepared for this to get really contentious very quickly. This is from the New York Post. Lawyer for Minneapolis cop says George Floyd killed himself. Let me take a step back for a moment, because this is politically fissile stuff. This could result in a whole new wave of looting and rioting. They overcharged. Let's be clear. They overcharged Chauvin. to make a point because of the politics. They overcharged him. Now, I'm not saying that he's not guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He may be. But to say that he's guilty of murder too, effectively, that's just them trying to make a political point. There's no way there's no way that when you see the video of him dealing with Floyd before this, there was a point at which he decided, yeah, I'm just going to kill this guy because I'm a racist. That's not what happened. He may have had a depraved indifference when he had his knee on the neck, but, now we're being told, and the initial coroner's report, which did not get a lot of it, the initial coroner's report said heart failure. Heart failure. Did not say asphyxiation. Then they had the family do their own report, and that said, of course, that was going to say asphyxiation. And there's millions of dollars on the line, too. They're obviously going to sue the city. It's going to be a huge check. So let's all really understand what the stakes are here. But let's also be clear that the original BLM story of Mike Brown that was told to us was a lie. So the BLM movement was founded on a lie. Hands up, don't shoot. That was a lie. It's not true. No one can make it true. It's a lie. Did George Floyd die of a heart attack because he had opioids in his system 3 times the amount necessary to kill a human being? And is that why he was saying he couldn't breathe even as he was walking in open air with no pressure on him anywhere for 10 minutes before the knee was on his neck? The answers to those questions are going to have big ramifications.